Hello and good evening and welcome to Absalom International School's full breakdown on university applications to the United States of America. We've seen the end of a Trump era and over 43% of the US population vaccinated as of today. All this points to it being an appropriate time to start reigniting the flame of studying overseas, especially in the USA for most of us here. I'm Vishal Sidhu and I'm going to be moderating this session today. So make sure you've grabbed some light snacks and drinks. This is going to be fun-filled, but a very informative and long session for everyone tuning in. We're going to cover the whys, hows, whats, whens, and everything that you could possibly fit in this one single hour session. Along with us today, we have Kate Brown, who's also our keynote speaker and APSOM's Director of Higher Education. She's had over 20 years of teaching experience in the UK, South Korea, and now Malaysia. She's single-handedly placed over 1,000 students into universities all over the world. So we're definitely very fortunate to have her expertise on board with us today. Alongside, we also have Pete, the CEO of Teleport, who has worked all over Asia, leading projects with the Royal Thai government. He set up a new Asia airline affiliate program all across ASEAN, in particular in India with the Tata Group and in Japan with Rakuten. Pete has also graduated with honors from the University of Cambridge and Harvard University. So we have a very vibrant group of panels that are with us today. And before we begin with this webinar, please feel free to leave any questions that you might have with regards to applying to the US in the chat box or in the Q&A option that you have on the Zoom bottom line. If you want to tweet to us, just use the hashtag APSOM2021. Let's dive into this webinar by taking a step of caution and just take a moment to evaluate why would the US be a bad option to apply for universities in the first place? Pete, what are some reasons someone shouldn't even think about applying to the US?
Hi, Vishal, and hi, Kate. Thanks for having me today. Good of you not to try to pronounce my last name because it's very long. And I also didn't leave it in the chat so people wouldn't feel worried to ask me questions. But I'm Pete. I'm from Thailand originally, but I live in Malaysia now. And obviously the question is a pertinent one, and my honest, simple answer is apply. Please apply. Nowadays, I think the world has, I'm not that old, but the world has significantly changed from the last time when I applied. And even then, people were saying the same things about how competitive it is, how difficult it is, how the world is changing, etc. But the reality is, if you don't try, you don't really know. And also, the more you try and the more universities you apply to, the more you get better at the process. And make no mistake about it, it's a game of the process as much as it is a game for talent. So, that's my short answer to your question, Vishal.
So, okay, that's a pretty interesting way to be able to tackle that question. Right, without wasting any more time, let's take a look at our keynote presentation for today. So Kate's going to be presenting about why you should apply to the US and at the same time take a stab at the step-by-step process for university applications to the United States of America as of 2021. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thank you, Pete, for being here. And Pete's obviously gone through the process, so it's great to have him, and I hope that he'll jump in if he thinks it's appropriate at any point to add anything. So yes, I'm Kate Brown, and I work as the guidance counsellor here at Epsom College in Malaysia. And like Vishal said, I worked previously in the UK, and although I did have students that applied to the USA when I worked in the UK, I didn't have that many. Since coming to Malaysia, obviously, there's in an international school, students apply all over the world, and we have had increasing numbers looking towards the US for their university applications. And I do get asked similar questions on a regular basis. So that's why we're doing this webinar this evening, is to kind of dispel some myths and to walk you through the process and to allow you to plan ahead, because applying to the USA is a very different process to applying to the UK. The admissions tutors are not academics. The admissions tutors are normal people who are going to be looking at your application through a completely different lens. They're going to be looking at who you are, what you stand for, your values, your principles, your contributions to your community, and the impact you've had. It's a much more holistic application, and it does require some forward planning. Pete, I don't know if you would like to say anything about that. What are they looking for in an application, would you say? compared to the UK then, from your point of
Yeah,
view?
I mean, Kate, you started off, I think, the introduction really well, which is, maybe a little bit of background. I applied to the UK and the US. And when I applied to the UK, I went through the UCAS system, as well as some of the parents may know, that's a common system where you provide a common application and you choose 6 universities. On top of that, obviously, because I applied to Oxbridge, I went through a specific kind of Oxbridge program. But what I realized pretty quickly was when I applied to the US and, my parents were a little bit extra zealous, and I applied to 25 US universities, right, for context. And I didn't get into all 25, but I just need to get into one. And what I realized is the 2 systems and the 2 approaches, from the application all the way through to who's assessing the application, is completely different, right? So with the UK, for example, particularly Oxbridge, which I guess is the closest analog to Ivy League schools and the such, it's extremely academically inclined. So it's based on, the subjects that you have, kind of chosen for your O and A levels. It's based on a degree that you are applying for, meaning that you choose your degree up front, and that determines, the interviews and the application process. It's, there is a whole kind of focus on grades and essentially kind of, meeting the minimum threshold to apply and also to obviously get past the conditional offer eventually. In the US, it's extremely different in the sense that you don't, first off the bat, you don't declare your major. You don't declare what you want to study. It is assumed that nobody knows what they want to study. Therefore, if that's not the context to which you apply, the most important thing to highlight is, why does it matter that, you as an individual are kind of going to be, the perfect kind of candidate for a broad-based, kind of education that you can figure out what you want to study later, but you have certain things intrinsic to you which they're looking for. So it's really more focused on you versus the subject matter. And I think that's the most obvious difference. The second difference is, in the US, basically you have no constraints. You can apply to as many universities or to as little as you want. And generally, unless you're applying for one specific track, which is called the early decision track, which is you declare one university that if they were to accept you, you would take that offer up. And which is what I did amongst the 25 universities. I put Stanford as my early decision, and I got in. And that was, that determines to some degree the path out, because, it is generally assumed that if you were to choose that, then that's the university that you have as your number one. And so they have this process where, bar the early decision, you can apply to as many as you want. And each university has their own question, flavor, style, kind of weightage on what matters to each university. And it is assumed that each candidate is applying to multiple universities. It is not assumed that, like even in Oxbridge, you apply to Cambridge or Oxford, like you choose one. And so the basis to which people apply is completely different, and therefore that sets the tone for how you stand out. And so, before I obviously keep rambling on, maybe I stop there for a second. Kate, did that help?
No, absolutely, that does help. So it's a completely, as we can see, the UK is really focused on your specialism, and it's completely focused on academics. And in that way, it's a much simpler process, and you can kind of, leave everything till the last minute, really, because all the admissions tutor who is an academic, who loves their subject and has dedicated their life to their subject, that person is going to be seeing, are you a best match for their course? Whereas for the US, it's not an academic looking at the application. They're not looking at you studying one specific subject. And so, like Pete says, they're taking a much more holistic approach, and your application therefore is going to be much broader, and they will be looking at your sort of personal development really from year 10, as we're going to show. UK is much later, whereas those of you who are hoping to go to the US, you need to plan ahead. And the purpose of this evening is to give you a heads up. If you're a parent of younger children, or if you're a student who's lower down the school, it's hopefully going to give you a heads up of the kind of things you should be getting involved in from an earlier age. Because every year I have students who want to apply to the US, and it saddens me when they haven't got those experiences to be able to put into their application, because they are then at a slight disadvantage for some schools. Okay, Visha, if we could go to the next slide then, thank you. Okay, so education is a gift, And, you know, the purpose of this evening is not to make people feel stressed or to think, oh, you know, they've got to start going through a box ticking exercise. Your passion, your enthusiasm, it should be infectious. It should really come through in your application. And if you love what you're doing and you're excited about studying, that's going to come through in your application, and you're going to be a far more attractive candidate. So please enjoy your education. Don't be obsessed about ticking boxes and ticking things off. Be inquisitive, identify your passions and pursue your interests. Take everything further outside the curriculum and enjoy it, okay? Getting involved with your community is a really important thing for the US. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means later, but it might be, you know, your school community. And I think Pete and I have had a little bit of a chat about this. We'll talk about that again. Getting involved with your community, identify your community. Does that mean your school? Does that mean your class? Does it mean your boarding house if you're a boarding student? Does it mean your, you know, that there's an old people's home in your hometown that needs to have funds raised for it because it needs to have the kitchen refurbished? Or you know, is there an orphanage nearby that you know that they would benefit from some sort of input? Maybe you're going to design a program to go in and help, you know, read or stimulate the children in some way. But it's something that's sustained and that has impact, and that you are, you know, if you're applying to the US, we're thinking beyond exams. Your academics are taken as a given. We're thinking bigger than exams. We're thinking about your personal development. We're going to look at the application, the essay application questions, and you'll see from those that if you do take on board what we're saying tonight as a younger student or a parent of younger students, if you look at those essay questions, you'll see that they're seeking students who have reflected on their learning journey, not just academic, but their personal development, how they've overcome challenge, how they've had impact. What have they noticed about the world around them, and how have they sought to change the things they've identified as being in need of change? Okay, next slide. Pete, jump in if you think I've missed anything at any point, yeah? Okay, so the application process then. So I've talked a little bit that it's holistic. This is what you actually have to do. So you'll do SAT or ACT, you don't do both. And these are standardized tests. So why would you need to do these? This is because it's the United States of America. Every state has got a different exam system, different grading, etc. And students from all over the world will be applying. And if everybody sits the same test, SAT or ACT, it allows the admissions tutors to compare like with like. And those tests will be part of your application. This year, they're not required because of COVID. So other things are being looked at. So this year it doesn't apply, but those things would need to be prepared for. We would recommend doing those at the end of year 11 or in the summer of year 12. You would have those scores before you enter into the university, into the college. Your IGCSE grades will be considered, as well as your A-level predictions or your IB predictions. Your leadership roles and your achievements. By achievements, we mean your personal achievements, you know, your impact in your wider community, as well as any leadership roles you might have undertaken, any initiatives that you've led on. Leadership and taking on responsibility and setting things up is very attractive to a US admissions tutor. You'll have to write a college essay. So Pete, I can't remember how many you said, 25 you said you applied to, did you?
Yeah, 25.
Okay, did you have to write 25 different essays then?
I wrote more than 25 different essays because sometimes it's multiple essays within, you know, each application.
Yeah, so yeah, bless you. So you will apply usually through the Common App. There are different application sort of portals, but the Common App has an essay, and then the college you apply to may set its own one essay or two essays. And we'll look at the types of essays later, but those essays need preparation. You can't just suddenly write one of these essays. You do need to think about what you're putting down very carefully. That sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. Every essay requires reflection, but these essays, as you will see, are about your journey, your learning, the impact you've had, and they need to be memorable. If you're going for a competitive college, you are going to be competing against thousands of others, and So the admissions tutor needs to remember you. If you're just talking about, one of the essays is about how you overcome challenge. And if you choose your challenge as being moving schools, well, that's probably, there will probably be hundreds and hundreds of other kids that write about that. Try and find something that's unique. Try. I think Pete said a while ago, something quirky. The quirkier, the better. Try and stand out. Think about what's unique to you. And you'll also have a recommendation letter from your guidance counsellor and from 2 teachers. And that recommendation letter, again, work with your guidance counsellor, get to know your guidance counsellor, build a relationship with them, and share with them your skills, your attributes, your learning journey, so that they can really collaborate with you as you work through the application process. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here we've got a sample application sort of timeline. So you normally would start in year 12, although like I've talked about for the standardized tests, you could start those a little bit earlier. They could be at the end of year 11 in the summer break. You're looking at November or January, depending if you're going for the early decision or the regular decision. This year, SATs are not required, or ACTs. Your interviews, you could expect to be interviewed, if you're interviewed, mid-October to early December for early decision, and regular decision is December to early March. Those interviews may well become increasingly important because of COVID, because if students haven't sat the SATs, then it's more likely that admissions tutors will want to meet with you. And you can expect your results, whether you've been accepted or not, January or May, depending on which option you've gone for. Next slide. Okay, so now I want to look a bit about planning ahead. Okay, so I've mentioned a little bit earlier that in the UK, the admissions team will not look at your school reports. Okay, it's not part of the application process. You will simply submit your UCAS application, which involves filling in a form and sending off a 4,000 character, including spaces, personal statement, which is purely academic. And your teacher, your guidance counsellor, will send off a 4,000 character, including spaces, reference on you. And the whole thing is focused on your academics. Nothing else is requested. Okay, they're going to look at your GCSEs and your predicted A-levels or IB. For the US, you will have to upload your school reports going back to year 10, okay? And that's because they're looking for consistency and they're looking for your contributions to school, your attitudes, your approach. So that's an important thing to know, because if I'd had my year 10 reports collected, probably I wouldn't have stood out that well. I didn't really start trying that hard until later. If you're targeting the US, be mindful that your reports will be requested, okay? Community participation is really, really important. So if you're in year 8 or year 9, you've got time to think about what would you like to start doing in year 10, okay? So from year 10 onwards, you should be involved in something. What might you want to set up? Now, I know I can see from some of the people in the audience, you're at Epsom now and you've set up, I can see some of you have set up academic societies. I know that you're doing that. Some of you are in year 10 and you're already, you've initiated a society, you're running it, you're having weekly meetings, you're inviting guest speakers. It is having an impact. Some of you have set up websites or blogs. You are having an impact, and that's fantastic to see. What could you do if you haven't already done something or you're not involved in something that would make a difference? Do you care about the environment? Could you organise beach cleans? Could you organise initiatives that would help tackle issues surrounding pollution or plastic or whatever in your local area? Can you see that there are students in the school who are struggling with their English because they've come to study from abroad, or maybe they've been unable to enter Malaysia for a while because of COVID, and so when they join us, when the borders do open and they join us, if you're a student in Epsom, maybe you could help them with their English. You could put together some sort of a club or a program to help them with their English language. Try and use what's here, if you're at a school, or what's in your school, because obviously then you don't have to travel, but some of you might have something in your hometown that you're passionate about. Some of you might, want to volunteer on a helpline. There are helplines for people that are lonely right now because of COVID. What could you do? What do you care about? Do you care about people? Do you care about animals? Do you care about education? Do you care about injustice? What do you care about? And how could you really harness that passion to make an impact and make a difference somewhere? Your principles need to shine through in your application. You know, who are you and what do you stand for? When you research your colleges, you're going to see that some colleges have a real identity and they will be looking for a certain thing. Pete, what would you say to that? I'm conscious I'm doing all the talking. Would you add in anything there? You know, when you were doing it, how did you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with the US is it's so competitive that there's this desire to capture a lot of data points about, you know, the person applying, right? So you can kind of see the school reports do matter. I don't think they matter specifically that, you know, the grades all line up, but I think it's more like there is, you know, you've demonstrated that you kind of have developed from an earlier age in terms of, you know, the things you get involved in. So it's because they know that people obviously, you know the system now a little bit better, know the process. So people start to do this whole like, okay, year 10 onwards, let's go out there and start stuff. But I think if they see examples, and I don't think it's about the extent of it, like the full, you know, kind of, you know, it's an extraordinary thing you've done, but I think it's just, there's some consistency in starting early, right? So specifically in my example, you know, my parents kind of knew the process because my brother went to the US and my dad was very familiar with the US system. So I was lucky in the sense that he knew, you know, he wanted me to be exposed early. So he would do things like, you know, I had to, he encouraged me to learn other languages, you know, beyond just the languages that you learn in school and as part of the A levels or O levels, right? So he started with that. He asked me to kind of encourage me to play musical instruments. And from a very early age, so I started playing stuff when I was 6 years old. Not to say that is a prerequisite by any means, and I certainly hated it, but it's a combination of those kinds of things which ultimately prove that, you know, you're interested in being broad, let's put it that way. So and everybody has their own way and style, right? Some people are great and have interests, hopefully, that allow them to demonstrate that. So please don't see it as, you know, it's about quantity, it's about, you know, specifically something huge that's going to make you that one thing, like you're an Olympic athlete or something. It's not really that. It's more like, you know, the school reports and everything else associated with these 4 things are to show the well-roundedness broadly, right? So commitment to your community, my dad knew this as well. And obviously, you know, he did things like, so when I was 11 years old, he said, hey, why don't you spend an afternoon going to like an underprivileged home and like, tell me what your experience was. Like, don't fake it, but just go there and tell me how you felt. So when I went there, and it kind of left a bit of a lingering feeling, like I'd never been exposed before. I said, can I write about it? I asked him, like, I just don't know how to kind of express myself. Let me write about it. So then when I wrote about it, he realized that I actually enjoyed writing. So he said, why don't you do more? Like, why don't you try to nurture that interest that was natural to me, as opposed to force me to do something that, you know, wasn't kind of what I enjoyed and what I, you know, was strongly kind of suited to do. So community can be shown in many ways. It can be community, obviously, can be broadly within the school and school clubs and things like that. Community can be a combination of things in your area, like you live in KL and, you know, you want to volunteer to like pick up trash or do whatever. I mean, there's so many things, but community can be in your church group. It can be in all sorts of things. So there's enough opportunities, I think, to pick a community that, you know, everyone's, you know, you feel kind of strongly about it, and you can do something there. I think the principles is hard to, you know, it's almost unrealistic to expect fully formed adults, right? At a year 10 onward kind of level. So I think the goal here, what really cuts through, the one piece of advice is, you know, try and be as transparent and as honest as possible, right? Where I think there's this pressure sometimes where you have to put up a front, like, you know exactly what you want, you know exactly what you stand for, you know exactly what you know, everything, you know, things matter, you got to, you know, something, you know. But I've seen, I don't know if you know, we can always send out links after this, but there, you know, I used to read all these admissions essays, that the one thing that stuck out was how honest some of these admissions essays were with respect to like principles. For example, people that grew up you know, poor and learned a little bit about financial literacy, and they wrote about that, right? And they wrote about their struggles with it. or in their community, or people that wrote about their dog and what they learned, kind of, having a dog in the house. Like, it doesn't have to be, I think, just want to stress that while it's about principles and what you stand for and stuff, but if you don't stand for anything, or if you don't know what you stand for, it's okay to lean into something a little more real and tangible. And in some ways that kind of helps you stand out, maybe even mistake. Yeah, it's more memorable, because at the end of the day, this is a battle for attention. This is a battle for, some unique part of you that resonates. And it's ultimately an admissions tutor reading this and feeling connected. And nothing connects better than, obviously, the truth or something honest, which is unique or different in some way.
Yeah, being kind of authentic. Yeah. And I think, like you say, it doesn't have to be anything groundbreaking. It's just, like you say, it's got to connect. You're trying to build a relationship with the reader. And I think the memorable thing, like, talking about your dog, because again, they're going to relate. You're just trying to find something that other people can relate to, and like you say, making it tangible, etc. And absolutely, I think Pete has made a really good point there, that, when you read my slides, you could think, oh, it sounds really overwhelming. When we talk about principles, like Pete said, we're not looking for completely, not adults. They know that you're not the finished article, okay? Not the finished article. You can be rough around the edges, but you are thinking and you care. Yeah, it's about caring about stuff. Okay, and that you've developed, then my last slide says you're developing as a person. When you come to write those essays, you're challenged to reflect on how have you developed, what have you learned, what have you overcome, and what did you learn from that process? Humility, compassion, those kind of things. You can see that there is, things aren't black and white. There are always two sides to stuff. It's those kind of things that we're looking at. Okay, Vishal, next slide, please. Okay, so offering something unique, what a thing to put on a slide. But what we mean there is you are you. There is no other you, as far as we know, in the whole universe. And so be you. This, like Pete said, this is your chance to connect. And it is kind of a competition. So put yourself out there and say what it is that you want to say, having researched where you're hoping to apply for. Use the time you've got to develop your skill set, to challenge yourself. And so, like I mentioned, some of our students have set up different societies within the school. And I can think of one society where there has been a conflict of ideas. And so there has been a need to negotiate and compromise. And that is a really hard skill to learn, to disagree without being disagreeable, not to, break the relationship, even if you might disagree quite strongly about something. And having a committee where you're having to thrash out ideas and come to a compromise is a really important experience and a valuable experience. And I can imagine that some of those students may well want to use that as part of an essay one day. Okay, so learning from experiences, learning from difficult experiences, developing those skills is really important. Now, Pete said to me recently that it's a 3.5% admission rate into an Ivy League university. And I'm going to ask Pete to join in again here. That, Pete, is there a bigger world out there than just Ivy League?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a headline statistic which I was reading, and I was shocked because, when I applied, it was 7%, and that was groundbreaking. And now it's halved. Right. I mean, I don't know in terms of the total application volume, that may have doubled as well. So you're almost kind of competing against, the fact that maybe it's just like the ultimate volume is even higher than it was before. Therefore, the admission rate is lower because there's obviously a fixed amount of places that, these schools can offer. Firstly, I think that the part of, is there a world outside the Ivy League? Obviously, because the Ivy League is 9 schools. And so, there are many schools. Stanford, for example, is not an Ivy League, but that's tongue in cheek. Obviously, it's considered, as, kind of on par as like a Dartmouth or a Brown or a, UPenn or Columbia and so on. So definitely there is a world outside the Ivies. I think there are also great places, depending on obviously your child that's applying, that maybe, they may get the best, the quality of education that's the same, but it may be slightly more tailored for them. For example, liberal arts colleges in the US, right? So the Wesleyans, etc. of the world. These are extremely rigorous universities and really difficult to get in, but are not considered Ivy League, but just, play such a huge role in people that are a little more artsy, a little more broad-based, kind of want to be rounded, are interested in lots of different things, are curious people. And those universities, though maybe not as known and branded, actually provide the same quality education, also tailored differently for certain types of people. There's obviously universities that are, like Berkeley, that is considered theoretically a state university, but obviously has a bit of a name attached to it, that is in the part of the US that people are excited by, which is, California, and, kind of proximity to the tech industry and so on. So you want to consider also kind of location, as, UCLA, for example, and other schools that, have location bias towards maybe the careers that some people are interested in, which is nowadays the tech industry, the media industry, right? Etc. Some, New York University is known as a finance school. So some budding bankers out there, may be interested in being at the Mecca of Wall Street, etc., and close to proximity, because, that's something that, kind of lends itself to their interest. There are obviously many other opportunities like this. So please kind of think broadly about, beyond the brand, but also kind of like what exposure you're looking to, your child, or, your family's looking to provide, and therefore, as a result of that, that gives you a wider pool. And yes, 3.5% of one school is more daunting, but 3.5% across, let's say 25 schools, okay, not 50, and all you need is one. And if anyone knows their permutations and combinations, that's certainly a much higher probability.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And then my last little point is that, you're going to get recommended, you're going to have a recommendation letter, and the recommendation letter is going to be so much better if the person writing it knows you really well, if that person's got a connection with you. So do get to know your guidance counselor. Do share with them experiences, because they are going to be able to write a far more engaging and personal and bespoke and memorable, again, recommendation letter about you if they really get you. Okay, so that's important. Okay, next slide.
Before we move on to the next segment, just a quick question, right? When we're taking a look at references, is it necessary that the references come from a guidance counselor, or could you collect a lot of different types of recommendation letters from a wider range of people as well?
Okay, so basically, Pete, do you want to come in, or shall I?
Yeah, I'm happy to add on as well, Kate. I mean, I'm sure you know this really well, but in the US, recommendation letters are actually understated but really important. So you want to be collecting more than one, and you want to be collecting, those that will give you, as Kate said, the closest kind of when you on reading, it's clear that they bat for you, they know you, they really believe in you, and that rubs off in the way that it's written. Because a little bit, one thing that's very different from the US and the UK sometimes, which takes a bit of calibration, is in the UK we're a little more understated. It's like, you're not about, when I was in Cambridge, to get a first, it was 70%. Like, if you get 70% in the US, you're basically failing at this point, because everything is around, kind of really 99.999, right? It's not quite great inflation, but it's pretty close. And so the mentality to which the person that is writing your recommendation also has to put the lens on is, the understatement actually hurts the candidate. The understatement actually, though coming from a really kind of genuine place, may actually read wrongly, because there's a cultural difference between the US and the UK, and that translates sometimes in how, whoever it is that you ask to write your recommendation is encouraged to write it. And so it's, to answer your question, Vishal, and before Kate obviously jumps in, is find more than one. And obviously the more personal, the better. Maybe if it's someone you've mentored in school, you feel some slight affinity for, you've seen them go through hard times, you've seen them turn around or whatever. So for example, mine was someone who put me in detention for 13 weeks in a row in boarding school, but ultimately came around and kind of, saw the change in me, so to speak. And so that person was the person I asked to write one of my, kind of recommendation letters, because they saw that huge shift.
Yeah.
And I was in boarding school, so the detention was like, it was like kind of going to lunch. And I had a lot of detention, but that person saw that shift in my behavior, and so that person really batted for me. So that's the second thing. And I think the third thing is, obviously there needs to be some calibration before they write it too. It's like, hey, especially because not a lot of people apply to the US from my, boarding school. So, hey, this is what this is what they expect, and this is what some examples of what they look like, and therefore that may put them in the better frame of.
No, I think the cultural thing, when I first started doing USA recommendation letters and seeing USA applications, the cultural difference for me, I'm English, British, shouldn't say English, British, would like to be European, British, yeah, it has to be quite over the top. Americans are different to British people. They're more over the top, and the recommendation letter has to be like that. You use more hyperbole, you do use more superlatives. The UK references are far more sort of, they're more British, they're more sort of reserved. And so I think it's important that you do get more than one. It's written by somebody that knows you. It's somebody that understands, like Pete said, then it's not understated. If you're excellent, it really does need to say that you're excellent and illustrate why, and sometimes people just reproduce the UCAS statement. They've got a kid who's applying to the UK and the US, and they use the same thing for both. No, that's not going to work, because a really good UK reference will be perceived as being understated for the US. And if it only focuses on academics, then it's selling you short, because you should have a whole load of other things in there, isn't it?
I think this differentiation segues really well into our next segment, where we want to take a look at essays itself and the different types of prompts that you can take a look at. So back to you, Kate.
Okay. Yeah, so here in front of us, we've got the Common App essay prompt. So these are the general essays that you would write. So you choose one of these. This is your Common App essay. So this would go to all of your colleges, but then the college that you're applying to, or the colleges, 25 in Pete's case, so you can get kind of see how much work you'd have had to do. They may well have their own essay. So if we just take question 1, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that's so meaningful that they believe their application will be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then share your story. I mean, that is such an un-British kind of question. So share your story. What do you love? And then question 2, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time where you faced a challenge, a setback, or a failure. How did it affect you? What did you learn from the experience? And that's quite a big ask. Talking about failure in an application and kind of turning that into a positive requires time. You're not going to do a good job of that just by rushing that last minute. Okay, so question 3, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. Something or someone has done something for you that's made you happy or thankful. How has this affected you? Discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth. So you can see these are quite abstract, touchy-feely kind of essays that allow you to be very personal, like Pete said, to be very authentic. And there's no academics in there. It's not asking you about a subject. It actually, you're making yourself vulnerable, essentially, aren't you? What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, so I remember, I don't think they've changed the themes that much. I remember some of these coming back to me. But so a simple example would be something, for the first one, I would write, if I had to, like, off the bat without thinking a bit further, I'm sure I could come up with a few others, would be, the fact that I hated my last name. I'm tired and I hated my last name, because I would always get that blank look every time someone looked at it. How to say my last name? Churun Wongsak. I mean, that's the kind of foreignized way of doing it. But I always hated it because I always saw the blank look in someone's face. So it almost made me shy away from being noticed and seen and called upon. And that is a huge part of my identity, which I struggle with. I mean, as a simple example. So if I wrote about that, that was, emotional, and there was clear connection with like that struggle, that every time you walk into a room, you know, you cringe at being seen and noticed, and what is, and how to extend that concept further, et cetera, in your life. You know, that's something that I would write about if someone asked me today, hey, write something about your identity that's interesting and different, right?
Yeah.
And that's one small example of many, but those are the kinds of angles that they're looking for. Like, what's proprietary to you? What's unique to you that resonates in some way? And I think that's basically what the questions are designed to unearth.
Yeah. So has anyone, I mean, if anyone's got any questions out there, any of you that are listening in, please do feel free to ask any questions that you might have. I mean, the role of us teachers is to support and help you. And so having conversations about these essays and, you know, what you, like Pete said, his name, you know, it could be your pet, it could be an experience that, you know, or being put in detention for 13 weeks and how that made you, you know, I mean, I've got instances like, you know, teachers that have trusted me. I remember when I was young, I won't go into too much detail, but I missed an awful lot of school because of financial difficulties. So every time I didn't go to school, in my mind, I was saving my parents' money. And my head teacher, one of my teachers sort of told on me to my head teacher, and he gave me enough money in cash to go to school for the rest of the year. In cash. So I could have gone and done anything with that money, and I will be forever grateful to Mr. Thomas, that was his name, because what incredible trust in what was I, 16, 15, I was you know, starting my A-levels, such incredible kindness. It really, really touched me. And so, you know, for me, he is somebody that if I was writing an essay, he would be in it, because if he hadn't have done that, I might not have done, you know, that set me on a path and has created principles in me and values, and something that, you know, he's left a legacy in a way. So thinking about people that have touched you, people that have inspired you, people that have challenged you, made you angry, whatever it might be, thinking about those things and keeping kind of a little mind map of stuff. And then as you come to write those essays, you can pick and choose from those experiences. Yeah. Okay.
Before we move on to answering the next question, if anyone wants to basically just come and become a panelist and turn on your video, just add that to your question and we will make sure that that can happen. And we will re-enable the chat as well, so everyone can quickly get on it if they want to get their videos on. All right, so the next question essentially is with regards to the SAT scores, because you're no longer taking a look at it, right? And I think a lot of the students or parents that are watching and tuning in today are quite worried about what else is going to be taken into consideration by these universities itself. And the specific question here is, would their previous report from Key Stage 3 be taken into consideration, since that's something that's quite valuable, or is it just above the year 10?
For me, I've only ever had to upload anything from year 10 onwards, and that's been from all, you know, America, Singapore, Canada, all of the ones that request reports have always been from year 10 upwards. I hope that's always the case, because I just think year 9 is really young. I mean, you know, but who knows? Given the situation, it may well be. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything there, but to date, I've only ever been asked for year 10 upwards. Yeah.
I think the follow-up to this essentially is with regards to that scoring range as well, right? If someone has a really bad score, is that something that is negatively going to be impacting them when they're going through with their university applications? Or as Pete pointed out earlier, it's going to be that margin of change, or how much you're able to grow and develop and become significantly better, that's going to matter. Or if someone hasn't made that much impact or difference in the past 5 years, would it still be worth applying to the US?
Yeah. Pete, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I mean, I think the default is still, my honest belief is it is always worth it, because different people look at things differently, and there is no one way to, you know, kind of assess what is suitable. And so I think, you know, for example, if you have, you know, less than ideal key stage 3 results. I have to admit, I don't know what key stage 3 means. So, if, Kate or Michelle, you can.
It's the little ones. So year 7, 8, 9, form 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so, if your results are less than ideal, then, obviously it would, it would be strange if you were writing about how such a perfectionist, right, you are, or something like that, right? It would be more interesting to talk about your journey, to go from, kind of, maybe finding school a bit of a chore and not being inspired by it, and then finding a Mr. Thomas that changed your entire, kind of trajectory. Like, that is something that is probably closer to something that they could understand and interpret all these data points. Because at the end of the day, it's all just a bunch of, they're all going to sit there with other, kind of admission tutors and debate. Basically, the way it works is there's going to be stuff that will, kind of cut you off at the boundary, right? So, it used to be SAT scores. And by the way, SATs, you used to be, I mean, I know they're not applicable this year, but, SATs, you could do multiple times. So it really didn't matter. And they didn't count that against you. So similarly, a lot of the aggregate, application documents, they're looking for basically a lot of things to base an opinion on. And ultimately, as long as your grades and so on are going to get you into consideration. But once you're into consideration, all the other things we spoke about, that Kate, you had a whole slide on principles and all the other things that are important, that's going to be what makes them deliberate harder in a room where you can imagine it's kind of like the FBI, and then they've got your picture up and all the facts about you or whatever. And that's where they're going to have that, try to have that informed debate, and obviously weed out their own biases, etc., as well in the process.
And they recognize, I think, I think what you've said, Pete, they're going to debate, they are people. And if on some level, you've connected with them, I know for me, I've had students that were actually really naughty when they were younger, actively, not in my current school, I might add, but previously, very actively disruptive. But that could have been for a myriad of reasons. It could be that their parents were going through a marriage breakup. It could have been that, their father had just lost his job. Or it could just have been that they were really bright and they were bored in the lessons. There's so many different reasons why children's results might not be that good. But if you as an applicant are able to connect with the person reading and tell your story, the results are one part of that. And people's reports are not perfect. You are not the finished item when you apply. What you're trying to do is show them that you're going to be somebody that they're going to enjoy having with them in that room for that learning journey at college. Are you going to be somebody that is going to enrich their community? And, most people are not perfect. And that's the charming thing about us humans. And what they're looking for is a connection, and something like Pete said, that they're going to understand and have some sort of an affinity with. So those scores are one part. So don't not try because of that. Always try. You're guaranteed. If you don't try, you're guaranteed not to be considered. So you've got nothing to lose by trying always.
Right. And we have 2 follow-up questions with it, which I think fit in quite well. The first one essentially is there any advice for a year 9 student with regards to what they can do at this particular juncture? And I think this goes back to the broader sense that we've been talking about when it comes down to community and what you can offer for others itself, right? I think it's very challenging, especially for someone in year 9 today, to go to see what they can do, especially since a lot of things are online and you have to be able to think outside the box quite a bit to be able to basically just get that community aspect sorted. So how would someone start thinking about those things, or try doing them in a different way, especially since you have all these challenges?
Yeah, I was just typing out some answers to the Q&A. So sorry, I was just doing this in tandem. But I think I see some of the Q&A still quite focused on like how many subjects is an A star and so on and so forth. I think again, the thing you can do now when you're in year 9 is encourage your child to pursue their interest outside of just the classroom. Like if there's one piece of advice, it's what's the one thing that you don't have to, you don't have to push them to get out of bed for, that they're just excited and interested. And that can be things like, shooting YouTube videos, or like, you know, kind of singing, or kind of something that is, you know, they're just really personally excited by it, and how do you use that as the baseline to kind of demonstrate their well-roundedness. I think that's the main thing, especially at year 9 level, where, okay, you're right. I mean, like, who really is, you know, key stage 3, like who really is, you know, fully formed at 7 and 9. But the reality is the US is, you know, it is demanding. Like, they are looking for people that, you know, just have some uniqueness about them that starts as early as possible, unfortunately. So if you're asking the question from like a year 9 perspective, or, you know, like what should they start now, in a sense, it's hard to manufacture. So therefore, you know, at that point, just lean into something that is already and all kids are excited by different things, and they have, you know, even if they are gamers and they play games, or like, that's something that in itself is not a bad thing to think about whether there's an essence there to do something with that, right?
Well, even computer games can have some sort of a, I don't know, morality, or
there are.
Why do you like that particular computer game, for example? I mean, yes, there's going to be something about it that you love. I'm talking to people. I think, I mean, how do you identify what you love? Talk to people. Talk about it. What excites you? What do you look forward to when you wake up in the morning? What are you excited by? Yeah. Okay.
Great.
I haven't looked at all the questions. What else have we got?
All these internal reasons for how you're supposed to be able to stand out and essentially just prepare yourself are amazing. But I'm just wondering if there's anything potentially that your school or your institution can do for you as well. And I think this is also part of the presentation that you had earlier, Kate, with regards to the Absum Edge. So I'm just gonna screen.
Well, we really do try and get the students to find, you know, what, like I said, what is it that you love? If you love something, tell us about it, and we will do our best to try and help you make that happen. So like Pete, you mentioned about gaming. Some kids really like shooting YouTube videos. You know, so great, let's do that. Let's try and get you a really positive digital footprint. You know, if you're applying to the US and they Google you, what's going to come up about you? Have you got something really cool? I've got one student coming in September who's absolutely obsessed by dinosaurs. Loves dinosaurs and makes these animations of his dinosaurs, and he's shared a few with me, and they are, you know, I can feel that he does absolutely love it. So that's cool. That's cool. He's memorable to me because he sent me some stuff, and it was interesting. So yeah. So next slide. It's basically all about what do you love, what lights your fire, what gets you excited. And for me, when I was younger, I was really obsessed by languages. I remember when I was a really little girl, my parents moved to an area of Britain called Wales. I walked in the classroom, everyone was speaking this other language, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. And I could not wait to learn French when I was older, and then German. And that's what I carried on learning languages. And I can tell you about why, because it's great when you can go to another country and really interact with the people there, and go into a room and get the jokes and get the subtleties of the language. I find that really exciting. And so what is it that you find exciting? I can't see the stuff on my slide because there's a big grey box over it. There you go. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so hopefully your school is going to get to know you, and hopefully your school is going to allow you to develop things that you're excited by. And it's going to work closely with you as a family, because parents often need to be involved, you know, because sometimes when the children are younger, if they're doing something outside of school, they might not think to share it with the teachers. But if the parents know that the children have got something they're passionate about, let us know. Do plan ahead. Do allow yourself to explore loads of things. Never say no to things. Try out new things. You never know where that might lead. And keep a record of what you've been doing. Keep a record of your thought processes, like a journal of things that have touched you, that you found exciting, that have annoyed you. because that you might find that really helpful when you come to write your essays at a later date. The SATs and the ACTs may well come back into being, and so it's really important that you do think about that if required, okay? It's not a huge ask. It's kind of GCSE level, maths, sciencey kind of questions, English. It's a question of practice against the clock. Community participation activities, leadership opportunities, and basically, hopefully your school is going to give you a holistic education, an opportunity to develop as a person, not just be an exams machine. Just being an exams machine is not the point. It's all about being an open-minded, reflective, authentic, excited, young human being. Yeah, and that's what's going to allow you to sort of shine through when you make that application. So that's what we try and do here. Yeah, any questions, please ask. I don't know if anyone's got any more questions because I'm conscious of time. I think we've got 1 hour and it's dead on 8 o'clock. And we haven't answered all the questions, have we?
Yeah, so let's just go through the questions as quickly as we can. I think the first simplest question essentially is there a due date by when someone has to decide whether they want to apply to the US or the UK?
No, there's not. You can apply to both, like Pete did. Apply to both. Yeah.
Okay. And the next thing essentially is, does your A-level subject depend on the school? I think it's about the availability. What are some subjects that APSM offers?
So, yeah, so basically your A-level subjects, do they depend on the school? Some schools won't offer some subjects, I guess. We try and offer a range. So we've got computer science to English literature, drama to DT, the sciences, maths, English, languages. So, yeah. Each school should offer a suite of A-levels that covers a broad range. They should have humanities and sciences in there too. Zinlingo, that's a cheeky question because I know who Zinlingo is and you know very well that I'm the guidance counsellor if it's a Zinlingo that I'm thinking of. Terry Kim, each subject has a different standard or line for receiving A-star A-level. How do you know that? What do we think we mean by that? Each subject has a different standard.
I think it's the boundary for you to get an A or A-star.
Yeah, okay, so the boundaries, the grade boundaries change every year slightly, but they are available online. They are available online. So you are able to find out the previous year's boundaries, but the current year, your year's boundaries won't be available to you because only once the exams have gone through that they decide on those boundaries. Extra is important when applying to the US. What exactly are extracurriculars that you can write? Any extracurriculars, anything will be valued as long as you're passionate about it and that enthusiasm shines through. What's this one?
Is APSM going to teach the students psychology?
That has been made as a request. I can see there's a like on there. That has been made as a request. And if we have enough students wanting it, then yes, we would. We used to teach psychology in my old school. It's just a question of making sure that we've got enough students that would want to sit it. And if so, yes. Examples of extracurriculars. Extracurriculars, sport, music, drama.
Starting a business.
Starting a business.
In a club, pursuing a passion project, all sorts. Volunteering in something.
Gardening, for painting somebody's going and visiting old people,
yeah,
or young people, or middle-aged people if they're lonely. Community activities required by UK universities. Do you know? No, it is not, I'm afraid. The UK is just obsessed by your academic results. I'm sorry to say, but the UK is not bothered about whether you contribute to your community or not. They'll like it and think you're a nice person, but they will not make it a basis as to whether they accept you into university or not. Yeah.
All right, so we are all done with the questions for today. So I think just to be able to sum up really quickly, a couple of key lessons that everyone should take back. The first one essentially is you should apply, especially if you can afford to pay the application fees. Maybe don't apply to 25 different universities because that's going to cost you a bomb.
If you want to have a summer break, no.
Yeah. And it's probably going to take you a few months to go through the application process, but just give it a shot regardless of your grades. And if you have any other questions or queries, we are always free to help you answer them. You can always reach out to us at admissions@epsomschool.com. And thank you very much for joining us today.
And I'm going to say a big, massive thank you to Vishal and a big, massive thank you to Pete. It's very kind of you to give up your time. I'm sure you've got better things to be doing than helping me out with the webinar, so I'm very grateful.
Not at all. I happy to be here and obviously happy to make myself available if parents found this useful. And I know it's a bit of a mindset shift, Vishal. So I think even I can even see it in the questions that, it takes time to kind of orient your mind to this kind of very unique and specific way of applying to university. I encourage that, when borders open and you can travel, that parents, if they can afford it and if they, are able to do it, go and do a few campus tours start early, bring your kids around, see the places. I think some ways that you can even almost stand out are, you took your child to see a university and that left an impression and that was the only one they wanted, for example. I mean, there are many ways to do this, but obviously, yes, you have to be able to afford it. And obviously it's not a cheap endeavor in terms of time and effort as well. But it's something that I think also kind of helps to, kind of push your children to think a little bit more about who they are